And welcome everyone to our very last AP Computer Science Principles Content Review session. Today's topic is data mining, simulations, and models, and that's presented by Joanna Stevens, who is at Garrard County High School in Lancaster, Kentucky. So I'll have Joanna introduce herself in just a couple of minutes, but just a disclaimer, first of all, while this online review session is intended for a Kentucky audience, space permitted, we always welcome students and teachers from all over the country and some in places outside of the United States as well. During this, we please encourage your participation, but please note any participant causing a disruption will be removed. AP is a trademark of College Board, which is not affiliated with and does not endorse this particular product. Information here for your hosts. I am Dr. Sherry McGuffin. I will be your host today. And there is my information, email address, smcguffin@kstc.com. And at Dr. McGuffin, if you want to follow me on Twitter. I'm STEM coordinator for Advanced Kentucky, which means that I basically support K through 12 STEM education in the state of Kentucky for all teachers. And with that being said, a little bit of meeting etiquette, which we go by some of these, most of these, since it's a small group, we don't have to as much. The microphones, all participants are muted upon entry, as well as video muted upon entry. Please leave your microphone off unless you're otherwise asked, or if you have a question specifically that you want to turn your microphone on for. Video participants, like I said, they're muted upon entry. It says to leave your video off unless otherwise asked, but you are more than welcome. Like I said, it's a small group. You can turn your videos on, and then in the chat button, if you find the chat button, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, where you're from, and then if you do not mind, tell whether you are a student or a teacher in the chat. And if you would like to also do that, you can rename yourself with your first and last name, and then you can put S for teacher or S for student or T for teacher. That may be helpful with some of the activities that we do. All the recording, I'll be recording today's session, and it will be available at bit.ly and /Advanced Kentucky, and that is case sensitive. So please make sure that you include the capital A, lowercase dv, and the capital KY. And there are also recorded sessions from our previous sessions if you're interested in reviewing those with your students before the multiple choice part of the exam. With that being said, I will stop sharing and I will pass the microphone over to Joanna to introduce herself, and here we go.
Okay, good morning. Happy Saturday. Looking at the chat, looks like we go from Florida to New Jersey, New York, and then we have several in Kentucky, and I'm located also just in central Kentucky. So all of the resources for today, I'll copy and paste that link in the chat. This is a Google Doc, and I'll share my screen. So Sherry, could I get to share screen?
Yes, absolutely. Let me go ahead, and you should be good to go now.
Yep, I am. Thank you. Yep. Whoops, let me get my Zoom back. Okay, so here's kind of my agenda for today. We'll start with the data mining, and then we have some simulations. And so the activities we have with the Desmos, the Quizlet, I put those links on there. It looks like most of us are teachers. So these are resources you can modify, you can edit, you can reuse. And then since we are getting so close to the test, just sharing some resources that I'm using in my class right now as we review some things as we get ready for the test. So I think we'll have time. These aren't, the last session I did was on algorithms and create task, which kind of, 2 hours was all, we could use every minute of that 2 hours. These two aren't as content heavy. So we might have some time to look at those reviews. So to get started, I would like to start by collecting some data from you all. And so if you could go to this Desmos link. And get my chat back. It's that link. And just go ahead and do those first 3 screens.
If you're having any problems with the links, feel free, you can PM me and I can navigate through that and help you to navigate through that if you need it.
Looks like we do have a couple students, so I'm glad to see you all here on Saturday.
And if you're having any issues after the first screen, then you can navigate with the next button at the top.
know some of you aren't from Kentucky, so on that third screen with some of those Kentucky foods, you may not be familiar with all of them, so feel free, you can Google those. Even if you're from Kentucky, those may be things that we don't have too often.
Some of them are very regionalized, for sure.
But it looks like most of us have been able to answer those questions. So on the first screen, so our weather in Kentucky is getting warmer. It's beautiful here today, but it is a little chilly. It's in the 50 degrees. It's 50 degrees, I think, right now. So it's a little deceiving when we look outside, but it's not raining. We've had lots of rain this week. But we do have s'mores as it gets warmer with cookouts. And it looks like we are all in the 4 to 8 range. 5 being the most popular, just looking at this data representation based on the data that was collected. So 5 was the most popular. So that's like white with a little brown on it. Some of you do like it, 7, 8, where I think 8 has a little bit of black. Alan likes it gooey on the inside, outside's golden brown. Toasted marshmallow, but don't over toast it. You want it to be gooey, but not burnt. Not charcoal. Charred to heat without burning the outside. So this is one type of data representation where I can see the individual answers spread out there. On the second screen, this is a big debate that we have in our class. Is a hot dog a sandwich? And I can see your data. I can see where we place the dots. So I can see for this group that we are leaning more towards the disagree. No one strongly agreed with it. Our dots seem to be in the middle or towards the disagree. Never thought about it, but you guess it could be. Technically, yes, but it is a hot dog. Just know it's meat between bread, but it doesn't share many of the characteristics of a sandwich. Sandwiches consist of toppings and meat with some form of bread. The hot dog's meat, and you can have toppings. You can even put chili on it. Something being placed in a bun. A sandwich should be 2 slices of bread. It appears to be, but it seems more like a snack. It's a hot dog. Hot dogs are not included in sandwiches. So this is an activity I like to do with my students. We'll do, is a hot dog a sandwich? Is a cheeseburger a sandwich? Is a taco a sandwich? And really try to define what is a sandwich and then use that definition to answer those. But this has been that was an activity that students really engaged with. And sometimes this school year that was hard to do, being virtual. But this is a different way of looking at the data. So on the first one, I saw like our individual rankings, which I collected different data too. But on this one, I can see your individual responses, but I can also see them all together. And then on the third one, how would we rank our Kentucky food? And so it looks like Derby pie, most appetizing, very close though with L8. Those are both really close. Hot brown was the least appetizing. I would disagree there. I love a good hot brown. Burgoo. So that's kind of like a vegetable stew. It's not, I would say it's not even super common in Kentucky, but it is one of our famous foods. We have it at Keeneland a lot, the horse track in Lexington. Spoon bread, that is famous in Berea, which is near where I'm located. But spoon bread, it's kind of like a creamy cornbread. Beer cheese is one of my favorite snacks. KFC is probably the one that's most internationally famous. It's the second largest restaurant chain in the world, following McDonald's. L81 is a soft drink that is bottled in Winchester. And I'm pretty sure you can only get that in Kentucky and central Kentucky. But it's kind of like a citrus ginger ale, a lot of caffeine though. So, and they do have different, they have like a cherry one and orange one too. And then our Derby pie, which is like a pecan pie and a chess pie, chocolate put together. So, but you can see this is a different data representation where I can see like the most people put hot brown as least appetizing. So it's a different way of looking at data. So I tried to pick 3 different ways that Desmos uses it. So in England, a 20% discount at KFC. Which now KFC is mainly going by KFC and people don't even know what the K stands for. But I know Sherry likes to travel quite a bit, but that's when people ask where you're from and you say Kentucky, it's usually followed by KFC or bourbon, horse racing. Those are the things that we're known for. So before we go any farther, a little bit about me. So I do teach AP Computer Science Principles at Garrard County High School. That's in Lancaster, Kentucky. It's just south of Lexington. I also teach AP Calculus, and my students took their Calculus AP test on Tuesday. So that was a big relief to have that over. And so now, it's full attention on computer science. And then I also teach Algebra 2. But this is my 3rd year teaching AP Computer Science, my first year with the new standards, just like everyone else. Yes, 2 AP classes. It's a stressful 2 weeks right now, but we'll get there. But feel free during this, put things in the chat box. I'll try to monitor it, and Sherry will help me with that. And you can also unmute and talk. This is very laid back. We have a small group. So if you have any questions at any time, feel free to chime in. So after seeing those data representations, before we go any farther and talk about it, why do we have data visualizations? Why do we represent our data in those different ways? So I'll give you a minute to just kind of reflect, what's the purpose of data representations? So some of those reasons, to be able to easily recognize trends in the data, a lot of you use those trends that we're looking for. So the patterns, and I since I teach computer science, but math teaching is my background, that's what I tell my students math is, that we're constantly just looking for patterns and investigating those patterns. But that's what we're doing with our data representations. We're looking for those trends, and that shows up more there than it does before we read that raw data. That sometimes just looking at those responses, I can't see how the majority of you like your marshmallows. Now in a small group, it's easier, but if I had 50 people responding, that would be harder to tell just looking at it to see which one was the most popular. To make it easier for people to understand, more readable, useful. But then I can also get a good snapshot of the responses, the shape, the center, the spread, the gaps, the outliers, using those stats words there. But yes, these are all true of kind of the why behind the data visualizations. And then, we have to also, as computer scientists, as mathematicians, we look to see what would be the best way to display the data. Now on Desmos, I'm limited by how I collected the data. It defaults on how it displays it. But whenever we would publish data, we would have to think about what would be the best way to convey the pattern to the reader there. So I want to start this and let you all do a little data investigation. So the Old Farmer's Almanac predicts our weather patterns. So there is a link, and it should work on the Desmos. You should be able to click that. If it doesn't, I put the link in the chat there too. If you could visit that link and pick a region. It can be where you're from. We're from enough different places. We could do that. Or you can just pick somewhere you want to go or just something you're curious about and look at their long-term weather patterns. And so just kind of summarize what weather should people there be expecting. And then I want you to take it a step further and kind of like analyze how will that affect what we do during those next 2 months. What behaviors will change, what are some things I might need to buy, activities, things like that. How will the weather affect human behavior? So I'll give you some time to go ahead, explore that website, pick a region, and then summarize the weather and the human behavior. Looks like someone dreaming of Hawaii. Their weather, their long range weather forecast stands out. It is definitely the outlier in the other responses.
That would be me. That would be me. My son lives there, so I always check up on it.
Yes. Everyone else looks like rainy and warm. We do have some Portsmouth, Ohio, a hometown, London. And then some of the human behavior, people might spend some time outside on some days. Rainy and warm is not bad, no, but I'm ready for like sunny and warm. Limited beach time. It will affect rainy, stormy, will affect how people dress, commute. It'll also affect emotions. I think that's really important that, it does affect our mental health and our emotions with the weather. People may not be able to go outside. It's still relatively cold in some places. Cooler days are less humid, which is a nice thing in Kentucky. It'll make it being more comfortable to be outside and more time on the playground. Yes, and that's people will feel more happy with the sunny weather. Yes, I agree with that, Joseph. So we've looked at data. We've kind of looked to summarize what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. That was the data we looked at. And then we did use that data to predict human behavior. So on screen 7, we're going to take our prediction a little bit farther. Just think about now, you work for a national retailer, and I gave you some examples: Costco, Meijer, Walmart, Target, Kroger, anywhere you shop, or anywhere you would shop in Hawaii. What are some retail items that are most likely to be purchased based on the forecast that we looked at? And all of our answers will be different since we looked at different places. But what are some things, if you worked at Target, you think people are going to come in and buy based on that forecast? So we're going to need lots of umbrellas, sunscreen, outdoor activities like basketball, sports, maybe some short sleeve clothing or bathing suits as it gets warmer, pools, floats, outdoor toys, frisbees, volleyball sets. I was reading this week, as it gets warmer, that we're looking at a chlorine shortage. That people, there's so many people put in pools during 2020, and that the pool manufacturers did not anticipate the amount of chlorine that was going to be needed as people open their pools. But shade tents, yes, as it gets sunnier. And so on screen 8, as you all are, and you can still be adding things on screen 7, but pretend you work for whatever place you picked. What would be your advertising plan? What would be your marketing plan? How would you, now that we've looked at the data, we know what's going to happen, we project what people will need, how would you market that to capitalize on this opportunity? So let's see, we're gonna give some sales on suspected future need items, and with a display shelf in front of the store with sunscreen, so that way they can easily grab that. Photos and advertisements with some rainy day emphasis. Displays in those highly trafficked areas, sales. You could do local news channels where people watch the weather forecast. Ooh, tying those two together where they get their data and then what they need for it. Ads on TV, specific summer items, sunscreen and sunglasses near the register. And that people may remember they need them and buy them on their way out. Social media, because even if we're outside, people will still be checking it. That is true. Appeal to emotions and basic needs. You need sunscreen, shade tints to avoid getting burned. Show families in the sun having a great time. Yes, that does appeal to our emotions because we want to be like them. We want to be happy. For rain gear, show someone not getting wet because they have a raincoat or umbrella. Use all the media, TV, social media, all of it. Talk about weather predictions, what you can do to get a head start with gardening, spring cleanup. Good. I think telling people what to do to get ahead, they like hearing that, so they're not behind. So those, I like to do this with my students to show, how can we use this data to profit off of it. It's nice when we can tie, a dollar sign to it. And then I like to share these two examples, or two that we looked at in class. But Red Roof Inn recognized that when people canceled flights, when airlines canceled the flights, people needed somewhere to go stay. So they put in a lot of energy and time into looking at the weather to see when was bad weather coming. So that way they could target having good deals, having advertisements on those days where it was likely a storm would cancel a flight. But they really looked at the big data. So the company delivered it mostly, on their phones, social media ads. When you're sitting at the airport, you see an ad for Red Roof Inn, your flight gets canceled, you go right back to that. That was their idea, and they've profited quite a bit off of that marketing tool, looking at the big data there. Similarly, pizza. When bad weather comes, when it's raining, storming, people don't want to go out in the weather, so they get a lot of pizza delivery. So a pizza chain used their mobile app and mobile marketing, and that they specifically, when a storm was coming, sent notifications through their app, so people would be more encouraged to order in during a storm or rainy weather. So just kind of two real world examples of where big data is helpful for retailers. Any questions on the big data, on how we can use it? So we will shift then to looking at some graphs, some different displays. So this graph shows the average retail fuel prices in the US, and I pulled it this week. But if you take a look at it, just being honest, do you think the graph is useful? If you do, tell me how is it useful? But if you think it could be improved, what would you do to this graph to make it more useful, to get more information? And if you want to make it larger, you can click those 4 arrows, and that kind of helps you see the graph better. You can enlarge it. So looking at it, you know, Girolamo and Eugenia, and all of you have anonymous names today, so no one's getting called out. And they say that it does do good showing trends over a period of time. It does compare multiple types of data there. So there's lots of, it's comparative data. We can compare those prices at different times. But then it looks like, you know, quite a few of you were like, it was just kind of overwhelming. You know, it did show overall trends, but it was really hard to get any solid information from it. It's hard to read because everything's checked. Would it be easier to start with them unchecked and add the ones we want to compare? So that's what Doris said. It's hard to read. Perhaps making multiple graphs, you know, with, you know, just gasoline, just diesel, or, you know, maybe even putting all the most common ones on there. You know, it looks like there's so many lines on top of it. Maybe we could even, Blaise Pascal says, like, what if we did a smaller range of time? That, you know, we did have a big chunk of time on there that we were looking at. And so it is difficult to read with all of that on there. So on 11, I have filtered the data. So that's something we've talked about in class, is how I can filter it. So now I didn't check all of the different types of fuel. I just checked gasoline and electricity. So that's all we see. So there's only 2 lines now. So do you think this graph is useful? And I've actually added some questions here too. What kind of information does this graph tell us? And what kind of problems could we solve? So take a look at that. So it does depend on what type of problem we're trying to solve. But, you know, if we want to compare electricity and gasoline prices over the last decade, this would be helpful. And personally, we just bought our first electric vehicle, or it's a hybrid. So, you know, this is very helpful for me to see, you know, how gas prices fluctuate. But, you know, I'm not going to be buying as much gas, but I am going, my electric bill will be higher because I'm plugging in my vehicle. But I can see that those prices have not fluctuated near as much as the gas prices have. You know, it does have its limits. It is clearer than the previous graph, and it does depend on what are we trying to look for. But you know, there are some limitations here, but, you know, whenever we filter the data, we do see things a little more clear. And then finally on screen 12, would you consider this big data? And I put the link from where I pulled this data from. So that way you can go see, would we consider it big data? Where is the website getting the data? So see if you can play around on that link to see what's going on with that graph. So this is coming from there's large volumes of data being collected here in this graph. And actually on the website, you can actually download the actual data. So you could do some data mining with that. So whenever we look at data and the graphs, something we want to look for is, can you see the raw data? Can we, go backwards to make sure it wasn't manipulated, that it was accurately represented, but then to also just see where it came from. So, they did get it from the Clean Cities Alternative Fuel Price Reports. And so I would consider this big data. They're pulling in lots of information, and we are able to go back to the original source of the data too. So that's just one example of big data here. If I turn off the pacing, there's another example on the last few screens of this Desmos. I don't think we have time to dive into this one because I do want to give us some practice time with multiple choice questions. But this looks at different types of education, income. This has some really good class discussions to use. Just looking at locations and how that affects different things. It uses it to predict things. But I would encourage you to check that out or use that with your students when we talk about graphs, neat representations there. But I do want to give us an opportunity to practice on some of the questions that we might see on the AP exam. So let me see if I can get that tabbed. So I have a quizzes, and it is not timed, so you don't have to rush through. Sometimes the quizzes are timed and you get more points for answering quick. But that is not, yes, the timer is turned off. So these are 10 questions that we could see on the AP exam. So you can enter that code or you can click the link that's in the chat. And after we do this, we will take a little break so you can get something to drink, something to eat, go to the bathroom, or just get up and stretch before we do our next part. I'm going to go ahead and start it, but you can join after I've started it too if you're having trouble getting there. I think we are almost all finished. And that's also something that is linked on the Google Doc. So you can go back to those questions and look at them later. Let me turn off the music. But hopefully some of those weren't directly tied to big data, but some of them were. And I know sometimes they don't show up the exact right way on quizzes, so it makes it difficult. But it looks like looking at our data, half of them were green. So that means a big percentage of us got those right. Yellow, we're almost green. And we did have one red question. But take a look at it. Well, first we celebrate our winners. We have Sherry, Evelyn, and Pat. But let's see those questions. Number 3 was one. Which one would a software tool like a spreadsheet or database help to efficiently organize? And College Board likes these 1, 2, and 3 questions where they give you those 3 statements and we have to select which ones are correct. And this is one where they were all correct. So a lot of us didn't include the 2. And that's not something I would think of interviews. I wouldn't think of interviews with a spreadsheet and database. But you could compile the information from that, whether it's their symptoms, where they are, into a database to organize it. Any other questions from those? So Sherry, is it good? Do a 10-minute break right here, or?
Yeah, 10-minute break real quick. If you don't mind, stop sharing your screen. And if you want to turn your video on, I want to do a quick picture for Twitterverse. So if you'd like to open up your, so I can see your lovely faces, and I'll do a quick snapshot, a screenshot. Let me get my screenshot up here. Anybody that would like to participate. If you don't want to, that's fine. I want to. But here we go. Ready? And 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, you are good. So 10-minute break. We'll come back. It's 10:59. Let's come back at 11:10. All right, 11:10. We'll see you then.
Yes, I can, Evelyn. I'll take a look at that. Which of these is not a potential? That first one. Yes. Yeah, so it would be randomized for everyone. So on that one, this is one where I would tell my students, maybe it's the best. Like I understand that you could make the argument for that one, having a benefit there, but it's which one would have the least benefit, I think is the argument that they would make for that question. That I don't think that a hospital is going to use tweets or blogs when they're changing their prices, where the other ones seem more likely. Does that help? Okay. Well, I will see you in 10 minutes. Okie doke. So welcome back. We will go ahead and get started with our next set. And this is on simulation. So these are two, I think, of the, I don't want to say, I think there were some of the more fun topics, just because they're so different than everything else in our curriculum. So can you all see my screen again? Yes. So we have a different Desmos for this one. But go ahead, there is our code. Whoops. There's our code. And you all can actually start on that second screen, since I don't think we gained anyone during the break. So I don't need to introduce myself again, but talking about simulations, a fun simulation is thinking about time travel. So would you rather go to the past or to the future, and why? It looks like we are almost evenly split. 4 of you would pick the past to visit with people who have passed on. You don't know what your future holds, and you want to keep things like that a secret. You would rather travel back and meet important figures and gain advice from them, and see people who have passed. So 4 of you would pick the past. Oh, and now we have 4 would pick the future. So we are perfectly split. So we can just send half of us in each direction. To prepare for what's to come, to change as needed. You want to see the computing innovations, which is a good answer in a computer science session. You want to see what the future looks like. And this is kind of very similar when I did this with my students, what theirs were. I did have a lot that said, like what Sophia said, excuse me, that, you know, the future is uncertain, but the past is certain. And I think this was really true with a lot of my students. Just in the past year, nothing has been certain for them. That, I mean, I know our school schedule has changed like 6 times. And so, I mean, it's constantly changing. And I think they just want some stability. They want to know what's coming. So I think I had more pick the past than normal, just because of all the fluctuations we've experienced. But I can't actually build a time machine, but we can do simulations. So I think this is just a good intro into those simulations. So there's 4 big words, vocab words that we need to know for the AP test, and they're kind of all related. I always think of models and simulations together, but I saw this graphic that also put abstractions and generalizations there. So when we think of abstractions, you know, I think of it's hiding the complexity, that I don't have to know how my car works. I just have to know how to start it and how to drive it, but I don't have to know the engine, the radiator, all of that, thankfully. Generalization, those place emphasis on similarities, that if I'm making a generalization, it's really just an overview of what's in common between things. But for today, really highlighting the model and the simulation. And I think this is my favorite way that I differentiate my head. The model is my actual product. That is something physical. So I think, like making a solar system model, I have something physical, and it represents a system of something. It could be a digital model, but then the simulation, it's the process of using the model. What am I doing to the model to study the behavior and performance of the system? So to make sure that we know the difference, on screen 4, we have a little card sort to do. So you have those 4 words, the model, the abstraction, the simulation, and the generalization. So you can sort those. They will not all have the same number in their group. And feel free to go back to screen 3 too, if you want to look at those definitions again. So for the card sort, you can, like, when you move those cards, the card behind it will turn blue. Like that will be a match if I put that there. Should group them. Okay. And then in the upper right hand corner of your screen, you should see your mathematician name. And like I can see, like right now, Sophia, everything Sophia has is all green. If you look at the Zoom on my shared screen, you can see how you're doing. So this is a nice way to give feedback, just because nobody else knows your name besides you. But we can look and see Sophia is super close. Pafnuti is really close. I bet it's just probably one card that's in the wrong group that would make those others turn green. Or maybe 2 of those cards should be in that green group. Same for Florence Nightingale, I bet. Let's see, Sophia is all green right now. So abstraction and generalization, just to give you a little hint, those only have 2 cards in their group. So it's just like abstraction and the definition, generalization and that definition. Those are kind of tricky there. Okay, so we're getting more green there. I'm going to pull Sophia's back up. So this was the correct match here. So we have our 2 kind of oddballs, generalization, abstraction. I'll be honest, anytime I can throw the word abstraction out in class, I do. I don't think I can reiterate that word enough with my students on what it means, that it's what's going on behind the scenes, low level details. It reduces the complexity of a system. Generalization, that's my similarities. And then simulation and model. And those are the 2 we're going to focus on. But a model is my physical representation or my digital. But my simulation is how am I going to use that? So the model represents that what I'm trying to solve. The simulation is I'm actually using it. So it does get blurry between those 2 there. And we are getting a lot more green here now. But the line is blurry between the 2. So models and simulations, they both help us save time and save money, that we can make models and simulations quicker and cheaper than we can make the real thing. Sometimes it's a safety issue too. Both are computing applications which represent a real world, or it can be something imaginary. So if I'm doing traveling to the future, that's not real world. I would be making something imaginary if we're going to the future. But a simulation, this is a big difference here. It changes one or more variables of a model, and we look at the change. So a model is more stable, nothing's happening, where the simulation, something is occurring, something is varying. Model tries to represent the actual system. The simulation, we want to observe, what if we change this, what would happen? So again, something is changing, something's varying there. So a model can be considered static, simulation dynamic, because that variable in the simulation is changing. So I think those differences, if we can remember, the model is almost static, standing still, where the simulation, we're moving things, moving variables. So I want to give you some time to think about what are some models and simulations. So the next 6 screens, and you do not have to do all of them, you can pick and choose. Can you think of any models and simulations that relate to sports? And like, what would be the purpose of a simulation for any sport that you can think of? And then I also put medical. So in anything healthcare wise, what are some simulations or models that we know about? I put the military, cars, automotive, food, and then education, teaching, since that's what I do. So again, you don't have to do all 6 of those. So just kind of think, what are some simulations, models that would help those fields? And you can skip around on those. So I'll give you, let's say like 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll see where we are on those. And feel free to Google. So for the sports, that was our most popular one, and I have a feeling it's because it was first. But I really like this simulation of sports. Wii Bowling, a lot of our video games, we're simulating doing it in real life. But there's lots of, I liked that one there. You know, a model, the playbook, that's a static model of the plays that we could practice and then use in a game. And then another simulation, Wii Golf, VR. So VR opens up lots of simulations that are crazy realistic too. So you're simulating the experience without actually going to the golf course or running the risk of wrecking a car for car racing. So virtual golf options, the Wii coming, you know, any of those where we're actually moving, doing the motions, those are excellent simulations there. Fantasy football. Oh, I've never thought about that, but you are simulating being like the general manager for a football team where you're making your own, and you can play against your friends. And then the Biathlon World Cup season simulation. Oh, wow. That's pretty neat. Building a VR car racer to put in his game room. We just redid our living room during the winter during COVID, and I was so excited because I said I have more VR space in my living room. So I'm jealous that he has a whole game room. That I just wanted more space, so I would quit running into tables. So switching up to medical, we can model the spread of viruses. We've seen lots of those models in the last year. Computer simulations for surgeries. I don't know a lot about that personally. I've seen it on Grey's Anatomy, where they do simulations to practice getting ready for surgery. And there's lots of models of the human body and simulation videos that will show how, you know, a disease can go through your body. So we can have diagrams and physical representations, but then we can also have like the VR surgery that they have. Military, flight simulations for pilots. That's always a popular one that students come to pretty quick. Okay, so the models of machines, just like the prototypes of building the models before they build the real thing, to demonstrate what to do and show plan of attack. Crash test simulations, drunk driving simulations. The model could be a car structure. Crash testing, see how the model will react. Oh yeah, the test track at Disney. I think it's at Epcot, where you can see where a car, how everything reacts in it. So you could test the car's features. Food. Oh, this is the one. We don't have anything for food, a model or a simulation there. Any ideas here? You know, I can't come up with any either right now off the top of my head. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm sure I had something in mind when I came up with it, but I'm drawing a blank. The model could be a recipe, because that would be something that shows you how to do something.
What about all those? I'm sorry. What about all those like those pictures on like Instagram and stuff like that? You know,
yeah, I think so. That would be a model. Right. On all the little videos too that pop up.
Yeah, the commercials. I remember like watching a commercial where they show you how they make a hamburger, but it's really not hamburger. It's like the ketchup isn't really ketchup and all this
right.
stuff. You know,
yeah. Lots of the Pinterest things, the TikTok things that show up. I think a lot of those would be things there. And then teaching. Various methods of practice testing, things that we do for animal dissections, yes. I know as a math teacher, I use a lot of simulations when I'm teaching probability. that I don't actually have my students roll the dice 100 times, but I might give them a website to go to that actually goes through it all. This whole year, yes, it's a good comment, a virtual simulation, yes. And Sophia's thing of a virtual lab, a simulation, on screen 12, that's actually an example that I pulled. So we have a frog. So I'm not going to dissect anything, but I can handle a virtual frog dissection. So if you just click on that link, we can see the insides of a frog, and you can check the boxes to see different parts of the frog. So there's obviously advantages of you doing this. One, you don't have to have frogs. You don't have to have equipment. We just have to have the internet. And I know in a year like this school year, you know, things like this have been very helpful, where we've been limited on our materials. We've been limited on who's in our classroom, who's not. But even if we are face-to-face, you know, just for time, for expense, for safety, you know, doing something like this is cheaper, quicker, safer. Now it's not perfect. You're not getting the experience of actually dissecting the frog and seeing it. So it's not the same, but there are some advantages to doing it. So, you know, we're trying on that model to demonstrate to what it would be like to see the inside of a frog there. And then I have another link, and these are both really sciencey, but I thought neat. So on screen 13, this is a simulation. Hopefully it loads. And you can do it a model or to scale. But I have things moving, so I can see the Earth moving. I can actually add and have the moon also going around the Earth, which I think this is so cool. And you can slow it down, you can speed it up, but then I can also change my gravity force, my velocity, and show all that while it's happening. But the variables I can change is I can change, like right now it's set to be the mass of our sun, but I can make it smaller, I can make it larger. And then right now it's doing Earth, but I could make it a smaller planet or larger. So since I'm able to change those variables, this makes it different. This makes it a simulation, not a model, because I can change things and see how it interacts with those. And I think it's neat showing, you know, how many days, how many Earth days are happening as everything's going on. But just a cool simulation there. And obviously that is one that would be hard to replicate. We couldn't do the real thing in class. We can't all get on a spaceship and go to space. Where the first, on screen 12, the frog, we could do that in class. It would be difficult, but we could make it happen. We can't make 13 happen. So that's why a simulation is so important for something like that. So any questions on simulations so far? Okay, so we are going to, we'll stop the Desmos here. There's a few more screens that are kind of summary screens there, but I want to give some time for some practice questions on simulations. And so there is the link. I'll go ahead and start it, but again, you can join after we start it too. Well, so on this one, it looks like we have no red. So we do have an improvement here. And again, this is a link on the Google Doc, and I'll share that link again. So that way you can practice these questions with your own students, or if you're a student, you can look at them again. So we had no red questions this time. We had a few that were green. If we look at which of the following is not an intended end result of modeling and simulation. So comparing the function of one system to the function of a different system. So it gets, when you have two simulations that are both simulating different things, it's hard to compare that. So that's I think a strangely worded question. But we just want to be careful. The more things that we try to replicate, the more it's going to be not as realistic. So this one, what is one reason for not using modeling and simulation on a system? If it requires a more analytical model. So that would be the thing where, we would not want a simulation or a model. We would want something more analytical there. Let's see if there were any others. So the amount of data available does not affect the time needed for the simulation. But like detail, quality, that is going to make the simulation take more time if we have a lot of detail. And I think that's a fine line there between what's the difference between detail and data. But the details would be on how the data interacts with each other. So again, those questions are all on this Google Doc. And as we're getting close to the end, there's the link to the Google Doc again. So that has the Desmos activities we did, as well as the quizzes. If you took the mock exam, I shared this with my students. It's nothing fancy, but it's a Google sheet where you can play around, and it'll ask you to make a copy. But you can input how many questions you got right on the mock exam, and then predict what you think you'll get on the create task, and it will give you an AP score. So I was really excited that they released that this year. They've released it to other classes that have been around longer than AP CSP, but it gives you a good prediction. So if you got 55 questions right on the mock, and you're shooting for, I think we should shoot for all 6 on the create, but let's say you think you're going to be, safe and say you're going to get 5. It should generate, everything might be just taking it's working on it. So it would predict that I would get a 3.
The link to the mock exam, if I'm not mistaken, this came from AP Classroom. And,
yes.
And so the mock exam classroom. There are also other examples of mock exams. You can use mock exams in CodeHS, and it's free. There are other, that's the one that I know particularly that has a free mock exam.
Right, and that's the one that this is aligned to, that on that mock exam, they released how it would be scored through College Board.
Right.
Now it's not a guarantee, but it at least gave more of an idea than what we have.
Right.
And then also, as you get closer to the dates of our test, I have a Quizlet, and this has over 100 just vocab words. So the Quizlet students can use with flashcards. You can do Quizlet live. I'm not sure. I haven't figured out how to do that with my hybrid environment I'm in right now. But the students that's good for independent study with the flashcards. GimKit. This is a fun game. My students love it. It's like Kahoot. It's similar where they get questions, only they are all getting different questions on their screen. So I guess kind of like Quiz, only once they get so many right, they get money where they can go buy upgrades. So it's kind of fun. There's also different modes of the game that you can play. Like there's one that's imposters, so it's like their Among Us game. But my students, we played that this week, like every day, the last 10 minutes of class, just to review some of those vocab words, like simulation and models, to make sure. So the mock exam, the thing I shared, Pat, that's all aligned to the 2021 mock exam that's on AP Classroom. And so teachers should have access to that, and then you can assign it to your students from there. I printed it off and had my students take a paper copy because my students are taking the paper test. And so that's an option. And then you can use any type of multiple choice grader to grade it. For the students to use the mock exam, they have to use the lockdown browser if you assign it to them on AP Classroom. And I know that that's not fun. So that's why I opted to do the paper version, so my students we didn't have to deal with the lockdown browser. Oh, so 100% remote. So yes, you would need the lockdown browser to do that. There are instructions. If your students are using like a school device, like my students have Chromebooks, your district like technology person can send it to them, so that way they have it. A laptop by the school. So there's an option whenever you get there, where it gives, there's directions that you can send to your district person. Let's see, for school administrators, you can send them that, and then they can force the lockdown browser to their laptop. That's the easiest way. But I'm not going to say it's easy. Nothing with this website I think is easy. Yes, it's getting better, but it's still not user friendly. Any other questions?
I have a quick one. I'm cutting in and out, so I don't know if you said it already. Where did you get the paper version of mock exam?
On AP Classroom. There's an option. It'll, once you assign it, I think you can hit print, and I just printed it out for them. And then I made like an answer. They bubbled in a grade cam sheet, and that's how I scored it.
Is it the same one that you had access to through your course audit as well?
Yes.
Okay, so you can also get it through your course audit. There's a PDF link there.
My students are, for computer science, I guess I have 75% in person, and I have 25% that are online right now. That's changed throughout the year. We were all virtual. We were an alternating day, like I had red day students and gold day students. But right now, 75% of mine in computer science come in person, and then the other 25 are online. For the online students, I had to do the lockdown browser. So I sent, we have Chromebooks, so I sent this to my district person. They installed it. 2 students had no issues. 1 student did. And it took us a while. We eventually got there, but it took quite a bit. Yes, they installed it through the Chrome browser remotely. They can also so yeah. So for the laptops, I'm not sure how those all work, if you can force install things. But even if they could just lift the restriction where students could install things, there's instructions for students to do it as well. So a question about the explore task, you do not need to do the explore task. So the explore task is something that went away with the new standards that we have. It is, now I did like an explore activity in my class with my students, but it is not something that we submit to College Board.
Now there'll be special questions in the multiple choice section that are related to what was on the explore task.
And as Sherry said, there's like going to be a reading pass. They call it a reading passage. When I think reading passage, I think ACT, lots of reading. They'll have a graph, some data, and they'll have like 4 to 5 questions to answer on it. So if a student takes the test but doesn't submit the create task, they'll just get zeros for the create task. So on that scoring sheet, I think it's possible that they can pass with just the test, but I mean that they're at a big disadvantage with that. But yes, I mean, it's not our choice as teachers, but you never know. So.
Yeah, I had a student in the past that, well, this was back when they can submit explore and create. Submitted the create, took the multiple choice, didn't submit explore, just got a zero or a blank on that particular part, but still was able to pass the exam because they did well on the other 2. However, that's still when you had the explore and create. So yeah, there's no way you can force a student to submit.
Right.
Yeah. You can call, and I have called and texted and bugged them to death until they submitted. But other than that, there's really no way that you can force a student to do it.
So, I mean, if they, based on the mock, if they got 62 of the multiple choice questions right, they would pass without the create. But that's only missing 8 questions. So that's hard. So we are at 12. So feel free to stay on if you have more questions. And then also you are more than welcome to contact me if you have more questions. I'm on Twitter. So you can send me a tweet or you can send me an email, and my email and everything is on that Google Doc that I shared. Yes, so the links on here will actually be those Desmos. It'll take you directly to it. And then so once you click the link, you'll need a Desmos account, and that's free. You can set that up. You can sync it to your Google. Yes, I love Desmos. So it's something, it started out as a graphing calculator, and then they built it into activities. Okay, so if you don't have Google, then don't worry about what I said about syncing it. But you can just create with your email address. You can create a Desmos account. And then the link that I sent will take you to this activity. And then you can assign it. Like I did, I clicked this where you all got the code or the link to get in. I have it set up so like I have classes for my students where I can send it directly to them. But if you're just doing it right now, you can assign it.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for everything today. I'm going to stop sharing your screen real quick, and I have one quick thing to share before I open it up for questions. And so here is the contact information. Thanks for joining us today. If you want to check out Advanced Kentucky's Computer Science Initiatives, there's the website. My email address, Aaron Timmons, who is a College Readiness Program. He's the content director for mathematics. Joanna Stevens, there's Joanna's email if you have any questions for her. She is the Desmos queen. The handouts and recordings, they can be accessed at the bit.ly at math, CRS, and bit.ly ADV, KY, and just remember all that is case sensitive. So thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions for Joanna or myself, feel free to hang out. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording right now. And you all have a great rest of the year and good luck to your students.